Hello. Good
Hey,
evening.
Rabbi.
Oh, hello. Hello. We missed you. We missed you. You guys okay?
Doing great.
How's the weather there?
Rainy and cool, unlike Southern California.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
cool today.
we got a little. I was just going to say we got a little bit of respite today. Did you go outside much, Mike?
Just this morning, taking the dog for a walk. Other than that, no.
I was going to say it's only 81 degrees right now, but it felt it felt better than that.
Oh, it was windy this morning, this afternoon, and just kills my allergies.
I was out at about 9 this morning. Very briefly, I ran out, and I wasn't out much, but it was pretty. Yeah, according to this, it was about 75 degrees. So it was. It felt like it didn't even feel like summer anymore. So it was. It was a much better day. But my eye, you can't tell because it's far away. But my eyes have been so irritated the last few days, and I haven't even been outside that much. Is that happening?
Doesn't matter. Your air conditioning's on. It brings in the bad air.
Is that happening to other people too, or is it just
Yeah,
me?
definitely with me.
My eyes were like so bloodshot. I mean, so irritated this morning.
You should drink more, and that way it would just counteract everything.
No one could tell that I was
Enjoy.
that my eyes were bad.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, hello. Hello. Well, Diane Gilda is up north. It's even worse up north. We were talking about the air quality. It's
Yep.
Tracy's on her way back right now. She said it was just horrific the last few days, right?
It is.
It looked orange on TV.
Yes.
All the air was orange.
It is, but the quality this morning wasn't bad because the smoke is trapped in some layers. But everything is orange. It's surreal. It's like it's.
I have a friend up above Sacramento, and he posted a picture this morning around 10, and you would think it's middle of the night.
Right.
That's how bad it was over there on the east side, over there up north.
Well, there's a weird line in today's. Well, it's actually last week's portion, but there was a line, and we didn't read it last week, so we were catching up. We are a week off, and yeah, there's a line that, well, it was going on last week too, but when I read it this week, I was like, oh my goodness, it was a little too prophetic, or not a prophetic really, but because it wasn't supposed to be for us in our land necessarily, but it was definitely relevant, hyper relevant, if you will. So, yeah, we're working hard on the High Holidays music, and recorded some more music today, and we recorded some music on Monday, and we're going to record all the way up until Monday. We're going to keep recording music and trying to get some really good stuff in. So it's a lot of work. And
as long as you're not singing, Rabbi, that's great.
It's not me singing. It's not me singing.
Rabbi, Joe Buchanan was very impressive. My son's girlfriend, who's not Jewish, loved him and listened to the Shabbat service.
I really dig him. I mean, I think he's the neatest, but it's partly because of the way he looks and sounds, but his style is great. I don't know. I just love him. But new guy too. You know, he's only been around for about 5 or 6 years. I think he only converted to Judaism maybe, I can't remember, 10, 11 years ago. I went out to breakfast with him. God, it feels like a long time ago, but it was November. Yeah, he lives in your neck of the woods, Schulman's. He lives in Texas. And he's a very cool Jewish musician. If you go back and look at our last Friday night service on Facebook, you'll see a couple of his videos. And I just think he's one of the coolest things in Jewish music right now. I mean, it's different. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think it's really cool. But we're going to have a little bit of something for everybody. We've got people like Joe and Josh Nelson, who are contemporary Jewish musicians. Josh is more pop, and Joe is more country. Nefesh Mountain, that's more Americana country. We also have traditional Chazanut. We have Herschel Fox, who's been the cantor at Valley Beth Shalom for about 20 years. He's doing some traditional, very traditional Chazanut. We also, he's kind of semi-retired now, but he's got an amazing voice, Herschel. And then we also have Noreen Green leading the LA Jewish Symphony, but the choir, the chorale, too, and that sounds really good too. So there's a lot of different stuff, and there's other people too. I mean, there's Craig Taubman, there's Gabriel Mann, there's a whole bunch of different. I mean, a whole bunch of people. Kenny, of course, will be there, but anyways, it's a lot of work and a lot of good stuff. Almost too much. We have an embarrassment of riches, but we're trying to figure out how to spread it out over the days and give everybody a good experience. At the same time, not making the service 5 hours long, which I promise it won't be. But anyways.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. I had never heard of Luke Combs, and he has enriched my life. Thank you very much. I have referred him to other people who have lost relatives, and it has been a healing experience for them and for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, he's really good too. He's another one of these country guys. He actually looks a little bit like Joe Buchanan, but Luke is from North Carolina, and he's amazing. He's just coming out with a new album too, I think this week or next week, and he's a great musician. I don't know how he I mean, I think he must have made a pact with the devil or something, because he's coming out with such good music. It doesn't even seem human. It doesn't seem humanly possible. What Luke Combs
touched my heart. He deeply touched my heart.
Yep. And he sings meaningful music. He sings fun music. He sings patriotic music. He's got a little bit of everything. So I definitely look forward to sharing his music and hearing his music.
Thank you.
Hopefully seeing him too. I think my daughter has tickets to see him, I think in December in Boston.
Really?
I don't think they're going to do the December show. And then I have tickets in, I think it's already next year already. They pushed it into July of next year in, I can't remember, Bakersfield or Vegas or someplace.
Wow.
But anyways, we'll see. I'm hoping we get concerts back. Anyways, so I hope everybody's been staying positive. We've got a couple more weeks to go before the end of the year. Needless to say, it's hard to believe I sat Shiva for 1 week out of the last 2 weeks, obviously. And then the last week I've been kind of coming back to normal, but it's definitely still in the midst of well, I'm still getting calls and cards, and it's still very much not even coming out. It's still very much in mourning right now. So I probably, as everybody else during this period, it's not normal. Your time doesn't move the same way right now. And,
right.
Obviously Joyce has dealt with this, over the last year. In a normal situation, we're supposed to take a year to kind of grieve and mourn and enter another situation after that first year. And, you go through a Shiva, you go through a 30-day Shloshim period. So you go a week, you go a month, and then another marking after a year. But gosh, I mean, I don't know, with the year that we've had and people not being able to get back to normal stuff, to have that balance of life, who knows? I don't know what the appropriate type of mourning process is when everything's been kind of put on hold. So let's see. I can only tell you that the time has definitely been working differently during this period. It's something I'm definitely going to reflect on and talk about during the high holidays this year. But high holidays are all about time. It's all about marking time and making time, recognizing our place in time and recognizing the power of time. I mean, Rosh Hashanah, it's an arbitrary day to some extent. Whenever we pick a day to say January 1st, Rosh Hashanah, whatever the day is, the fiscal year, these are all random dates. Whenever you're going to stop time and say, this is where we're marking time from, it's somewhat arbitrary. But you look at it and you say, this chunk of time, what happened over this chunk of time? And in a normal year, when you have 12 months or you have 52 weeks or you have, you know, however many hours that is, right? 525, whatever the song from Rent. The reality is that this year, half the year now has been not frozen, but at least like slogging through time where it just hasn't, we haven't interacted with time the way we normally do, because again, we can't go out, we can't do the normal things that we do, we can't we can't travel, all those kinds of things that we do. We can't, I mean, my daughter started school yesterday and she's, it's strange, it's not what we hoped would happen. But we have, it doesn't really feel like she's back at school, and she is. I mean, all those things that people didn't get to do this year, or at least the last 6 months, there's an accounting for that. So we'll see. And again, I hope the next 2 weeks or a week and a half for people is, meaningful and helps us close out the year and hopefully move into a new year with the necessary strength and positivity and hope that we need to get through this next year. And I mean, God willing, this time next year we'll be in a different frame of mind. We'll be this will be this will be the past, but who knows. But it's a good segue into the last few weeks of the Torah, the last few weeks of the book of Deuteronomy. We always have the holidays always take up a few of those weekends, which means a few of the Torah portions that we usually look at the end of the year are related to the reading that we do for the holidays. For Rosh Hashanah this year, it falls on Shabbat. Obviously, we don't read the Torah portion, not this week, but next week is the Torah portion for Rosh Hashanah. The week after is the Torah portion Ha'azinu, which then takes us into Yom Kippur the week after, and then the week after that it's Sukkot, and it actually, Sukkot falls on Shabbat, so we have a special reading there. So we have these special readings for the holidays that always kind of, when we're coming to the end of the Torah, we're jumping around. We're not necessarily reading the last 5 or 6 chapters of Deuteronomy. We're also then skipping around and doing the holiday portions. So that's why, even though we're like almost at the end of Deuteronomy, it's gonna jump around a little bit, and we're not gonna necessarily, you almost have to go back and remind yourself, oh wait, where am I again? And I know I'm at the end of Deuteronomy. So, look, I always think about that when I get to the end of the year. And then there's things that happen, that have now been part of my life. I think about the fact that we read Ha'azinu around the time of September 11th in 2001. And this year we're also reading, we'll read it a little bit later, but it's always a time of thinking about the high holidays, and also 9/11 when I'm reading the Torah portion, in certain years. I actually wrote something for the Signal that's going to be out tomorrow or on Friday, which is September 11th. It's the anniversary. And again, to think about 19 years passing. So the Torah also, it affects the way we read history, and we think about where we were well, at least I do. I think about where I was when I was reading the Torah portion when something else happened. And in particular, 9/11 was one of those times. Anyways, we'll talk about that, I promise, in the coming weeks and when we get to it. But so last week we left off in the middle of Ki Tavo, because last week we were supposed to read Ki Tavo, but because we missed Ki Tetzei for the Shiva, the week that I was off for Shiva, we read Ki Tetzei last week and about half of Ki Tavo. And so we really kind of marched really fast through Ki Tetzei, which was unfortunate because that's a portion that you could probably read over, that one portion you could probably read over 2 or 3 weeks. Because as we mentioned, Ki Tetzei is got over 70 mitzvot, 70 commandments, and it's got a lot of different kinds of commandments. And we marched through it pretty fast. And then we went into Kitavo, but we didn't finish Kitavo. So we're going to finish Kitavo, and then we're going to read Nitzavim, this week's portion, which I mentioned has some of my favorite lines in the Torah. And then we're also going to read Vayelech, which is the other portion that's usually matched up with Nitzavim, but it's very short. It's one chapter short, so it's super short. So before we jump into it, I kind of feel, and again, some of you were not with us last week, so I apologize again. And if you want to go back and read Kitetze, it's got some great laws in there. But Harvey, I know you said you had questions about, or you wanted to make some comments about some of the things that you read last week. So number one, I want to make sure if there's one or two of those that you want to talk about, at least it gives us something that we can also bring up for people who weren't here last week. But was there something in particular that stuck out in your mind from last week, Harvey, that was?
No, there wasn't anything particular. I talked to Joyce about it. It's like, where did all these come from? Some of these seem to be outlandish. And I can't come up with one, but as we read them, I go, when did this come up? What year did they write this? And how far into civilization, I guess, was it that some of these weird things?
Well, here's the weird thing.
And I don't have anything in particular.
Yeah, well, here's the interesting thing about Deuteronomy in particular. So if we follow kind of the traditional Jewish answer on this, which is that it was written by Moses or given to Moses, then Deuteronomy would have been written around 1200 BCE. If we follow the scholarly answers on this, then it was written about 600 BCE, about 600 years later. But that's about the latest that it would have been written. So the interesting thing about this is that there's a window, bless you, there's a window of about 500 or 600 years that this would have been written during. Now, did civilization change during that period? Yeah, but not in a major way, at least from what we know archaeologically, that there was not a huge difference in civilization. You know, this is all what we would call Iron Age, civilization, and it's still very much an Iron Age. And there wasn't much in the way of events that completely changed the world as we would get into soon. And what's interesting about this is that means that Deuteronomy, no matter what, is older than Socrates and Plato and the great Greek philosophers and the nation state of Athens and Sparta. That Deuteronomy is older than that. Deuteronomy as a book predates those Greek cultures, the Hellenistic culture that everybody admires. Deuteronomy is older than that. So to kind of put that into perspective again for where they were in history or where we were in culture then, the greatest empires that we had encountered by that point were the Egyptians and the Assyrians by that point. And the Babylonians were just starting to become a major power. The Neo-Babylonian, or the rule of Nebuchadnezzar and the Neo-Babylonian Empire was just on the horizon. So it's ancient times. I mean, these are times when people are not, there's not a whole, at least from what we know from archaeology, there's not a huge global trade yet. There's huge parts of Europe still at this period that are basically living like and we know this from archaeology, like they're living like cavemen. I mean, they're not literate. They don't have any writing in Europe, at least in Northern Europe at this point. It's very much like England, France, Germany, those are literally countries that are living, those are areas that are not even close to being civilized yet. So, and by civilized, I mean, they don't have cities, they don't have writing, they don't have agriculture. I mean, they have very basic subsistence agriculture. So by archaeology, I mean, the Middle East was very developed. Parts of India were being developed. Parts of China are starting to be developed. But this is not, most of the world is just kind of emerging out of caves. I mean, quite frankly. So on one hand, you'd say, well, gosh, this is pretty outdated. But you have to remember, I mean, there's huge chunks of the world that the idea of having language, the idea of having a city, the idea of having laws like this, the idea of having a house with a we read last week about having a parapet, a rail around your roof of your home. I mean, we're talking about whole chunks of what we consider, Europe, where people don't even have, they're living literally in caves. So this is, keep that in mind. I mean, still a lot of the world hasn't even entered the agricultural revolution yet. Huge chunks of it. So to answer your question in a long way, there's a lot of world that's not even that couldn't even read. So it's hard to believe that, that there were such disparities, but there were. And a lot of people would find it hard to believe that it was like that for much of Europe, but it was.
But it's also hard to believe, Rabbi, that there were so many sexual outlandish things going on that they had to have all these rules and commandments about sexual interaction.
Yes, which by the way is probably reflective more of people, and at least the way the Torah presents it. That's what happens when you live in a city. That's what happens when you live in a community where people are interacting in a way that they would say encourages that kind of behavior. And again, it's not like we've changed a whole lot since then. I mean, we would say that the more people live in a cosmopolitan area, the more that type of behavior is encouraged. And it's true. I mean, look, part of it is look, people are people, and humanity definitely has, we have every society has its dark side. However, there's also legislation that encourages or discourages certain kinds of behavior. Right. Look, the bottom line is our community in Santa Clarita decided many years ago, this is one example since it's been brought up. We decided a long time ago, we're not going to have strip clubs in Santa Clarita. We decided recently that we're not going to allow, certain types of businesses to open up in Santa Clarita that, for example, that sell cannabis. Those were things that the city of Santa Clarita decided to do. There are other places where people have said, and again, generally speaking, in cities, larger cities, where I don't want to say anything goes, because every city has laws and ordinances, but definitely there's more things that are acceptable in those areas. We know that. I mean, that's not a political statement. That's a fact. That's a fact. I'm not saying one's good or bad. I'm not even going to judge it. I'm just going to say that is a fact that there are things that are legal in the city of Los Angeles that aren't legal in Santa Clarita. So there is legislation that either can encourage or discourage certain kinds of behavior. So keep that in mind. I mean, that hasn't changed a whole lot even. What we would consider to be tolerable or things that we'll say are legal or things that we're going to judge to be, by our standards, we're not going to accept them. I mean, a lot of these things we would say are not acceptable by our standards today. Most of them, not all, but most of them. So, and it's definitely important to the Jewish people or to Israel as a nation that they do this. And this is actually the way this chapter where we left off begins. Chapter 28 begins, if you obey the Lord your God to observe faithfully all his commandments, which I enjoin you upon this day. Again, that word hayom, which we read since the beginning of Deuteronomy, right? Asher anochim etzavecha hayom. It's literally the same words that are in Shema ve'ahavta. Asher anochim etzavecha hayom. That God has commanded you this day. And the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth. And that's what it says again. We've had that language before. So what do we have to do? We have to fulfill the commandments. And if we do that, then in return, again, this chosenness or this the special relationship we have with God is conditional on our behavior. It's not like we're special simply because we're Jewish. We have to actually do something. All these blessings shall come upon you and take effect if you will but heed the word of the Lord your God. And here's the blessings. So we read a version of this before, and now there's another version of it here. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country, which again is Ir. The word Ir in Hebrew is city. And the word sadeh literally means in the field, but can also, again, be translated as outside of the city, where you have more open space. We could say the suburbs. Today, we could literally say the suburbs or in the rural communities. But that's really what it means. It doesn't mean in a country. It means exactly the way we would say like out in the country today. Blessed shall be the issue of your womb, the produce of your soil, and the offspring of your cattle, the calving of your herd, and the lambing of your flock. So all the product that you bring forth, including, again, here, your children, your flock, all these things that you're going to have. Blessed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. Blessed shall be in your comings and in your goings out. And Baruch atah bevoecha uvaruch atah betzetecha. Those beautiful words, may you be blessed in your coming in and may you blessed be in your going out. That's oftentimes put at the by the door. This is the blessing over a house that sometimes people put in their homes. In Jewish tradition, again, that phrase you can say to somebody when they come to see you, and of course you can say when they leave too. May you be blessed when you come in, and may you be blessed when you go out. And that's beautiful 6 words in Hebrew. Baruch atah bevoacha, baruch atah betzetecha. Be blessed coming in and be blessed when you leave. Great words to have above the door. The Lord will put to rout before you the enemies who attack you. They will march out against you by a single road, but they'll flee by you by many roads. They'll be in complete disarray when they leave. The Lord will ordain blessings upon you, upon your barns, and upon all your undertakings. He will bless you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. The Lord will establish you as his holy people, and that's the word Am Kadosh. You'll be a holy people. As he swore to you, if you keep the commandments of the Lord God and walk in his ways, all the peoples of the earth shall see the Lord's name is proclaimed over you, and they shall stand in fear of you. It's an interesting idea because one can make the argument that this is definitely happening, or at least happening for Israel today, that there are a lot of countries that are now accepting Israel, or at least signing peace treaties with Israel, as we've seen in the last few days, partly because they admire Israel, partly because they fear Israel. And they also, of course, think that Israel will be a good ally against some of their enemies, including, obviously, Iran. So that interesting blessing is very relevant today. The Lord will give you abounding prosperity in the issue of your womb, the offspring of your cattle, and the produce of your soil, in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to assign you. The Lord will open his bounteous store, the heavens, to provide rain for your land in season and to bless all your undertakings. You will be creditor to many nations, but debtor to none. Which is interesting because, again, this is in the Torah. This is in the Torah, this idea that you should, again, never be in a situation where you're in debt, but to be a country that is owning and has credit, but is not a debtor. And that's a very interesting idea. It's something that, again, we look as a metric for how strong a country is what kind of debt that they have. We can argue about it, how good it is, how bad it is. But most people would say it's not healthy. The question of how much debt you can have, I'll leave that to economists, and I'll leave that to people who talk about it and who study it a lot more than I do. But I can tell you one thing: it's not good. It's only a question of how bad it is. You're never in a good situation to be a country that owes money. I mean, people say, well, if people have lent you money, if people have given you credit, have lent you credit, then it shows that they believe in you. Well, yes and no, because the reality is that the countries that are the strongest, that are in a stronger position, literally can call in a debt, not that they're in debt, and that they're in a situation where their debt can be leveraged against them. So this is definitely something to think about. And again, it's something that Israel has worked real hard as a country to get into a situation where they are not a country that is in debt. And so Israel has worked real hard to balance its budget. And it's one of the things that even people who don't like Netanyahu have recognized, that his economic policy has created a situation that Israel is no longer an economic basket case.
Right.
So this is undeniable. The question of, again, what sacrifices Israel had to make to do that, some people say that they were too much, but most people in Israel are even those who don't like him, are grudgingly in admiration for what he did as far as getting the country out of debt. And especially for a small country and for a country that does not have a lot of people, being in debt is really, really tough. So again, it's about strength. It's about national strength and not being in a problem, not in a situation. The Lord will make you the head, not the tail. You will always be at the top and never at the bottom. If only you obey and faithfully observe the commandments of the Lord that I enjoin you again, again this day, to do and to keep and to observe and to do. And do not deviate to the right or the left from any of the commandments that I enjoin you upon this day, and turn to the worship of other gods. And this phrase here, hayom, yaminu, smol, don't go to the right or left. Generally speaking, what that is referring to is going after other gods. When the Bible talks about going to the right or left or deviating from the path, generally speaking, they're not just talking about behavior. They're talking about one thing in particular, which is the worship of other gods. And here you get, but if you do not obey the Lord your God to observe faithfully all his commandments and the laws which I enjoin you upon this day, all these curses shall come upon you and take effect. And this is the klalot. These are the, as opposed to the brachot, these are the klalot. These are the curses. So let's take a look at the curses. And as I just recalled, and thank you, somebody just sent me an email, you're not on Facebook. And I knew I forgot something. So hold on one second. It's going up right now. Too many things to think about. But hopefully, again, right now, it's the first part. But we're going live right now. Sorry. All right. So here's the curses. And again, without taking away too much of the drama, everything we just read, read it in reverse. Cursed be you in the city, and cursed be you in the country. Cursed shall be your basket and your eating bowl. Cursed shall be the issue of your womb, and the produce of your soil, the calving of your herd, and the lambing of your flock. So the word aror, over and over again, aror. So again, before we had the word baruch, now you have curse. Aror ata bevoecha. Cursed are your comings and goings. The Lord will let loose calamity, panic, frustration in all the enterprises you undertake. And you shall soon be utterly wiped out because of your evil doing and forsaking me. So again, what is it that you did? You worshiped other gods. The Lord will make pestilence cling to you until he has put an end to you in the land that you're entering to possess. The Lord will strike you with consumption, fever, and inflammation, with scorching heat and drought, with blight and mildew. They shall hound you until you perish. Here's the line, folks. The skies above your head shall be copper, and the earth under you iron. Wow, I thought that was pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
The sky above you shall be nachoshet, shall be copper. Pretty copper the last couple of days, I can tell you that. That was the perfect description of what those skies look like. Not a good sign, right? It's not a sign that good things are happening when the skies above you are copper.
Excuse me, is there symbolism between the copper and the iron?
Yeah, so there definitely is. So thank you, Maureen. The nachoshet is copper, which by the way is the same word we have for snake, the same root, nachash, Nachoshet, again, probably because snakes in that area were probably more copper colored. We have copperhead snakes, even, obviously in America, but copper is considered to be valuable and also, but also ominous to some extent, because you made weapons out of it. You made weapons out of copper. And barzel, and actually copper and iron together, right? You're making bronze. You're making some of the weapons that people had. So it's almost like the skies and the earth are going to war against you when you combine them together. So you have nechoshet and you have barzel. Barzel is the Hebrew word for iron, and it's actually a name. Barzillai is sometimes it's not very common, but it's a Hebrew name. Sometimes I'll say it as a last name, Barzillai. But it is iron. It's Hebrew for iron. Iron is obviously a symbol of strength too. I mean, I don't want to say it's not always bad. Neither is nachoshet, but because they're used for weapons, because those metals are used for weapons, they're ominous, and they are combined. When they're combined against you, it is literally like the world is turning against you. The heavens and the earth are going to go to war against you. So there is a beautiful symbolism in that. It's not really so much the colors, actually, as it is the materials being symbolic of war. And again, it's all bad. The Lord will make the rain of your land dust, and sand shall drop on you from the sky until you're wiped out. So again, instead of rain, you have sandstorms. The Lord will put you to rout before your enemies. You shall march out against them by a single road, and you'll come out by many roads. You shall be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. It gets bad, it gets worse. Your carcasses shall become food for all the birds of the sky and all the beasts of the earth, with none to frighten them off. So you don't even get to be buried. You're going to be carried off by animals, which is horrible. The Lord will strike you with the Egyptian inflammation, which again reminds us of the plagues. And that's exactly the word that's used here. It says, Shechin Mitzrayim, right? Dam, Sfardea, Kinim, Arav, right? Dever, Shechin. The boils. This is the boils of Egypt. So the plague comes to you. That horrible plague you had in Egypt, that they had in Egypt, that's going to be you. You're going to get it in the land of Israel. And that's not all. You're going to get hemorrhoids and boil scars, an itch from which you will never recover. And that's the word, lo tochal laharfeh. You will not be able to get healed from it. The Lord will strike you with madness, with blindness and dismay. And the word for madness, by the way, I'll learn a little Hebrew right now. Beshigaon. 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 Sounds a little bit like meshuga, right? That's where the word meshuga comes from. Meshuga is Hebrew. Then in Yiddish, meshuga means crazy, right? Meshuga. So shigaon is madness, and meshugas literally is craziness. It's madness. So that's the word meshuga, comes from the Hebrew shigaon, or meshuga, is to make somebody crazy. The person's meshuga. So that is an illness in itself, by the way, right? And you can see madness, mental illness is also then connected with blindness, ivaron, and then the last one is beat mahon, in dismay, in beat mahon lavav, in the heart, dismay in the heart. You shall grope at noon as a blind man gropes in the dark. So the daytime is going to be like nighttime. A little eerie, folks. A little eerie. Too real. You shall not prosper in your ventures, but shall be constantly abused and robbed, with none to give help. If you pay the bride price for a wife, another man will enjoy her. If you build a house, you shall not live in it. If you plant a vineyard, you shall not harvest it. So again, all those things. And again, you shall slaughter an ox, you shall not eat of it. Your ass shall be seized in front of you, and it shall not be returned to you. Your flock shall be delivered to your enemies, with none to help you. So this is really, really bad. So the curses come out even, you can say, even worse than the blessings. Your sons and daughters shall be delivered to another people while you look on, and your eyes shall strain for them constantly, but you shall be helpless. A people you do not know shall eat up the produce of your soil and all your gains, and you shall be abused and downtrodden continually until you are driven mad. And there's the word meshuga, which is to be driven mad, to be made mad, with what your eyes behold. The Lord will afflict you at your knees and your thighs with severe inflammation from which you will never recover, from the sole of your foot to the crown of your head. The Lord will drive you and the king that you have set upon you to a nation unknown to you or your fathers, where you will serve other gods of wood and stone. You shall be a consternation, a proverb, a byword among the peoples to which the Lord will drive you. You'll be like the wandering Jew, and it became true. Though you take much seed out to the field, you shall gather in little, for the locust shall you consume it. Again, a reminder of the plague of the locusts. You plant vineyards, till them, you shall have no wine to drink, or drink from the store, for the worm will devour them. Though you have olive trees throughout your territory, you shall have no oil for anointment, for your olive shall drop off. Though you beget sons and daughters, they shall not remain with you, for they shall go into captivity. The cricket shall take over all the trees and the produce of your land. The stranger in mist shall rise above you higher and higher, while you sink lower and lower. He shall be your creditor, and you shall not be his. He shall be the head, and you the tail. All these curses shall befall you. They shall pursue you and overtake you until you are wiped out, because you did not heed the Lord your God and keep the commandments and the laws that he enjoined upon you. They shall serve as signs and proofs against you and your offspring for all time, because you did not serve the Lord your God in joy and gladness over the abundance of everything. You shall have to serve in hunger and thirst, naked and lacking everything. The enemies whom the Lord will let loose against you, he will put an iron yoke upon your neck until he has wiped you out. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, which will swoop down like an eagle, a nation whose language you do not know, a ruthless nation, right? That will show the old no regard and the young no mercy. It shall devour the offspring of your cattle and the produce of your soil until you have been wiped out, leaving you nothing new, nothing of new grain, wine, or oil, of the calving of your herds and the lambing of your flock, until it has brought you to ruin. It shall shut you up in all your towns throughout your land until every mighty towering wall in which you trust has come down. And when you are shut up in all your towns throughout your land, the Lord your God has assigned to you, you shall eat your own issue, the flesh of your sons and daughters that the Lord your God has assigned you, because of the desperate straits to which your enemy will reduce you. He who is most tender and fastidious among you shall be too mean to his brother and wife and bosom and the children he has spared, to share with any of them the flesh of the children that he eats, because he has nothing else left as a result of the desperate straits to which your enemy shall reduce your down. And she who is the most tender and dainty among you, so tender and dainty that she would never set foot on the ground, shall begrudge the husband of her bosom and her son and daughter. The afterbirth that issues from between her legs and the baby she bears, she shall eat them secretly because of utter want, and the desperate straits to which your enemy shall reduce you in your towns. Folks, this is about as bad as it can get, because you literally turn to cannibalism and eat your own family. That's how bad it's going to be. Now,
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
On Ki Tetzi, there was a lot of negativity brought out, but it appears it was brought out in a polite manner. In Ki Tavo, all the negativity, to me, it appears that it's coming out vindictive, like it was written by two different people.
Well, there is a theory that at least this part of Deuteronomy, the blessings and curses were in a different place, were from a different source. So yes, it is possible that's the way it was originally written, because it does seem brutally violent and very, very much right there. And you're right. It's more euphemistic in Ki Tetze. And it does seem like totally different a totally different thing.
Is it game over?
What? Oh, so the blessings, I think Ginny, you were talking about the Dodger game, but anyways, don't tell me what happened. I don't know what happened. That's okay. I'm not taping it. I now know what happened. But anyways, the blessings and curses, this seems to be like a formulaic ritual. I mean, this seems to be like something that somebody read out loud, and this is what people read as kind of like a ritual statement of what they were going to do, or what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And so it seems like a covenant. It seems like a covenanting statement. And again, why do we have to have it all written out in detail? Because again, it seems like it was the kind of thing that people actually said out loud as a prayer, not a prayer, but as a outward statement. And that's a possibility. I mean, it's a possibility that that this was actually like a text that somebody read, or the people read, and again, we read the other one where people say amen after every one of them. That was the earlier list of blessings and curses. So it could be again that these were like a formula. These were statements and were brought in as an example of what people are supposed to do. But the blessing and curses is a very memorable part of Deuteronomy. Look, it's a tough portion. I mean, what do you do with this portion? I remember, look, I mean, almost every year we have kids that have to read this portion for their bar bat mitzvah. I mean, it's not, you don't want to read this with a kid. I actually, coincidentally, this was my sister's Torah portion when she was a girl, young girl growing up. She had this portion. Look, there's also blessings in this portion, but you can't talk about the blessings without the curses. First of all, the curses are longer, they're more descriptive, they're more powerful, and you can't just say, well, this Torah portion says there's blessings if we do the right thing. No, because the power of this portion is that they're both next to each other, the blessings and curses. And again, according to what seems to be at the beginning of the portion, half the tribes were on one mountain and half the tribes were the other while they're reading these things the first time. Later on, was there a ritual where the king would come out and read this every year and try to encourage people to do the right thing? It's very possible that this was a ritual. It's very possible that this was something that actually people did. And so one of the reasons why it was so descriptive and poetic was because it wasn't just read, it was read out loud. It was sung, or it was, screamed at people's, at people in front of a lot of people, in front of a lot of people, there was a ritual, as we said. So these are all possibilities, Harvey. So this is, again, we just finished with the most horrific, which was this description of cannibalism. Now, look, when was this written and who wrote this is there are clues in this, because this is actually what's described in the book of Jeremiah and in the book of Lamentations, what we read at Tisha B'Av, which is the description of what happens when the Babylonians went to war against us in 586, according to the book of Lamentations, that this exactly happened. So was it written by the same author? Was it written by an author who knew exactly what was in here? There's definitely a connection between this and the book of Jeremiah. As a matter of fact, let me just do something since I have it right in front of me, and since we all have it right in front of me. Let me just show you a little bit of the book of Lamentations. So again, according to tradition, we read this book, and it's not a very long book. It's only 5 chapters, but these are the chapters that we read when we come to Tisha B'Av and we reflect on the destruction of the temple, the first and second temple, that we read what happens when the temple and when Jerusalem is destroyed. So let's take a look at some of the language in here. When people are literally looking at Both men and old, maidens and youths are fallen by the sword. You slew them on the day of your wrath. You slaughtered them without pity. This one kind of goes back, chapter 3 kind of goes back to this back and forth, but let me put up chapter 4. Hold on 1 second. The little children beg for bread, none gives them morsel. Those who feasted on dainties lie famished in the streets. Those who are reared in purple have embraced refuse heaps. The guilt of the poor exceeded the guilty of Sodom, which was overthrown in a moment. Now their faces are blacker than soot. With their own hands, tender-hearted women have cooked their children. Such became their fare in the disaster of my poor people. The Lord vented all his fury, poured out his blazing wrath. He kindled a fire in Zion, which consumed. This seems really, really too coincidental that, they didn't have in mind exactly what we just read in Deuteronomy. You just read it. According to this, it said he's reporting it after the fact. With their own hands, tender-hearted women have cooked their children. It's as horrific as it says it's going to be. According to the Book of Lamentations, this happened. So, it's pretty horrific. So, yep. So let's go back to Deuteronomy. And again, that word dainty, that word in let me just find out where it was. It's not exactly the same words, but it's close. It's close enough. It's anuga. Anuga. And anyways, it's terrible. I mean, what can I tell you? It's terrible. It's terrible prophecy. And again, according to the Book of Lamentations, it happened. If you fail to observe faithfully all the terms of this teaching that are written in the book, to reverence this honored and awesome name, the Lord your God, the Lord will inflict extraordinary plagues upon you and your offspring, strange and lasting plagues, malignant and chronic diseases. He will bring upon you the sickness of Egypt. So that, that literally says, the sickness of Egypt will be upon you. Think about that. It is literally going back to Egypt. Moreover, the Lord will bring upon you, in Lamentations, we read about Sodom and Gomorrah. These things that happened will happen again, and they'll happen to you. Moreover, the Lord will bring upon you other diseases and plagues that are not mentioned in this book of teaching until you're wiped out. You shall be left a scant few after having been as numerous as the stars in the skies, because you did not heed the command of your Lord. And as the Lord once delighted in making you prosperous in many, so will the Lord now delight in causing you to perish and wiping you out. You shall be torn from the land that you are about to possess. The Lord will scatter you among all the peoples from one end of the earth to the other, and there you shall serve other gods, wood and stone, whom neither you nor your ancestors experienced. Yet even among those nations you shall find no peace, nor shall your foot find a place to rest. The Lord will give you there an anguished heart and eyes pine and despondent spirit. The life you face shall be precarious. You shall be in terror night and day with no assurance of survival. I mean, it's not going to be better for you when you're in exile. When you're in exile, it's also going to be bad. In the morning you shall say, if only it was evening. And in the evening you shall say, if only it was morning. Because of what your heart shall dread and your eyes shall see. The Lord will send you back to Egypt in galleys, by a route which I told you you would not see again. There you shall offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but none will buy. These are the terms of the covenant which the Lord commanded Moses to conclude with the Israelites in the land of Moab, in addition to the covenant which he made to them at Horeb. The last verse of that portion, of that chapter, is, in addition to the 10 commandments, you also have this covenant. You also have this brit. And that's what it says, a brit a brit, and it says, in addition to the brit of Horeb. So this covenant at the mountains, as they were about to cross into the land, at least here at the end of chapter 28, says it's like the covenant at Mount Sinai. And as you can see, it's a very long chapter. It's 69 verses. It's a very long chapter. Again, we didn't put in the chapters and verses, but it's a very long section of Torah, whatever you want to look, however you want to look at it, because we recognize that. How do you break that up? It seems like all that chapter is one text. It's a long text. It's not, again, it almost has to be written, because how can you memorize all those verses? Maybe people did, but it seems like a formula. It seems like, as Harvey said, it seems like a text in its own. And according to this, it's kind of like a brit. It's kind of, I mean, it's not kind of, it says it's a brit, but it's kind of like a ritual formulation. And it's tough. I mean, it's not, I mean, like if you're saying, what do we remember? You're supposed to remember the covenant at Mount Sinai. You remember the 10 Commandments, and then you remember this. That's a tough thing to remember. This is part of the Torah, though. Now, we're going to finish up the Kitavo part. It says, Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, you have seen all the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his courtiers in the whole country, the wondrous feats that you saw with your own eyes, those prodigious signs and marvels. Now, did they really see them? No, these are their kids, but let's assume some of those kids were, some of them were kids when they were still in Egypt, but they weren't adults. These are now adults who heard those stories, maybe saw some of them if they were young kids, but they're supposed to remember this. To this day, the Lord has not given you a mind to understand or eyes to see or hear. I understand that. You may not have grasped it. I led you through the wilderness 40 years. The clothes on your back did not wear out, nor did the sandals of your feet. You had no bread to eat, nor wine or intoxicant to drink, that you might know that I am the Lord your God. I kept you in a certain state of almost like holiness, of almost purity of holiness, that when you would be ready to come into the land, when you were ready for this point, this would be your time. This would be your place. I protected you. I've kept you holy to this moment. When you reach this place, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan came out to engage us in battle, but we defeated them. We took their land and gave it to the Reubenites, to the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh. We read about that at the end of Numbers. Therefore, observe faithfully all the terms of this covenant, that you may succeed in all that you undertake. So again, it takes us back to Numbers, and it takes us back to that moment where we won this great victory. And so even though it ends with this kind of the blessing and curse, and then we get these like few verses at the end, which kind of end on a happier note, the reality is when we come into this next portion, to this week's portion, Nitzavim, there is this sense still that we're in this place, we're about to enter the land, but you're going to see the tone of it is much different. It's not this blessing and curse formulation. It's not this covenant, but it's a different type of, it's a different type of binding to God, much more positive, and it has some very beautiful lines. So let's take a look. It says Atem Nitzavim. So the second word in Hebrew, Atem Nitzavim, that's the word that is the name of this portion. You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your tribal heads, your elders, and your officials, all the men of Israel. But it's not just the men, and it's not just the officials, because it says your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from woodchopper to water drawer, to enter into this covenant of the Lord your God, which the Lord your God is concluding with you this day with its sanctions. So is this the same brit? Is this a different brit? Is this what we just read? But take a look at what Moses says here. To enter into this covenant, which the Lord your God is concluding with you this day, again, Hayom, with all the sanctions, to the end that he may establish you this day as his people and be your God, as he promised you, and he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I make this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone. And this is where it gets real powerful. but both with those who are standing here with us this day before the Lord our God, and with those who are not with us this day. Well, you know that we dwelled in the land of Egypt, and that we passed through the midst of various other nations through which you passed. And you have seen the detestable things and the fetishes of wood and stone, silver and gold that they keep. Perchance there is among you some man or woman, or some clan or tribe whose heart is even now turning away from the Lord, to go to worship the gods of those nations. Perchance there is among you a stock of sprouting poison weed and wormwood. When such a one hears the words of these sanctions, he may fancy himself immune, thinking, I shall be safe, though I follow my own willful heart, to the utter ruin of moist and dry alike. The Lord will never forgive him. Rather, the Lord's anger and passion rage against that man, till every sanction recorded in this book comes down upon him, and the Lord blots his name out from under heaven. The Lord will single them out from all the tribes of Israel for misfortune, in accordance with all the sanctions and the covenant recorded in the book of teaching. And the later generations will ask, the children who succeed you, and foreigners who come from distant lands, and see the plagues and diseases that the Lord has inflicted upon that land. All its soil devastated by sulfur and salt, beyond sowing and producing, no grass growing in it, just like the upheaval. And there it is, Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which again are part of the Sodom and Gomorrah area, which the Lord overthrew in his first anger. All the nations will ask, why did the Lord do thus to this land? Wherefore that awful wrath? Now, what is so amazing about this is that here the Torah is telling us that this covenant or this brit, this agreement is not just with you, but with those who come after you too. It is not just for you. It is for all those who are part of the community of Israel. And again, here there's a recognition that if you break the covenant, all these bad things will happen. It's not obviously as descriptive as it was before, but it says they will be told, because they forsook the covenant, the Lord, the God of their fathers, and made with him when he freed them from the land of Egypt. They turned to the service of other gods, worshiped them, and the Lord was incensed at that land and brought upon it the curses recorded in this book. The Lord uprooted them from their soil in anger, fury, and great wrath, and cast them into another land, as is still the case. Concealed acts concern the Lord our God, but with overt acts, it is for us and our children ever to apply the provisions of this teaching.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
a couple places we read, it says this book. They're talking about Deuteronomy.
That's what it seems. And it seems, and again, the word that it says is et kol hadivrei haTorah hazot, which is this Torah, which is why they use the capital T for it, because the word that's used there is Torah. It says right there, haTorah hazot. So it seems as though, again, this is more than just a covenant. This is actually the teaching. This is like the rules. And it's a covenant which you and your descendants are in. It's a covenant for all time. It's not just you guys that are standing here. It's everybody who comes after.
Right, but as we talked about earlier, that Deuteronomy was written later than the other books.
Yeah, and it seems as though you can make the argument that one of the reasons why, and it's not obviously the only reason, but one of the reasons why we have to read those other books is so that people understand the references to some extent. Here you have Deuteronomy referencing Sodom and Gomorrah. What's Sodom and Gomorrah?
Right.
We have to have the references to the plagues in Egypt. What were those plagues? So to some extent, did the writer of Deuteronomy assume that we would have those other books in front of us? Probably not. Did the later writers and editors of the Torah think that we needed to have those? Absolutely.
Right.
As people move further and further away from those events, you can imagine the people saying, you know what? We got to teach people about those things. And even though there aren't many commandments in Exodus, and that part of Exodus, and that part of Genesis, there's no commandments, as we said, except for, circumcision in the book of Genesis, and maybe, again, not eating the back part of a cow, and maybe being fruitful and multiply. So maybe there's 3, but most likely there's 1 commandment in Genesis. We didn't keep Genesis because of the commandments. We kept Genesis so that we understood the background for who we are and how we got to where we were, how we got to this place. But yes, the Deuteronomy was the teaching. Deuteronomy, at some point, I believe, it's not my belief, it's what most biblical scholars say, there was a time when the only book that people saw as the Brit, as the covenant, was the book of Deuteronomy. That people, had the book of Deuteronomy and they read the book of Deuteronomy, and that was their basis for how they lived their lives. That the laws that were in Deuteronomy, to some extent, somebody had the book of Deuteronomy. I mean, the author of Deuteronomy definitely had the other books of the Bible. There's no question. But did the author of Deuteronomy think that one day you'd be reading Deuteronomy and be able to turn back and look a few pages, well, not a few pages, but look the scroll, go through the scroll and look at the other 10 commandments? No. I honestly believe the author of Deuteronomy thought he was preserving the 10 commandments so you'd have the 10 commandments, not thinking that that another editor would have tacked that on before it. So that's why, when people look at the differences between the 10 commandments, and they're almost the same. I mean, the differences are minor, but the fact that there are differences are because nobody ever thought we're going to look at Deuteronomy and Exodus in the same book, let alone that I can now take 2 seconds and show you, well, not 2 seconds, you can time me, but it's under 30 seconds that I can bring up the 10 commandments onto the screen right now. Nobody thought that you'd be able to do that. So yeah, does it look like there's an error? Yeah, but nobody ever thought that was going to be the error. Nobody thought the person who included it in Deuteronomy wanted you to read the 10 commandments, not thinking that you'd have the other 10 commandments to read. So it's interesting. And when you read Deuteronomy that way, you come away with it with an interesting perspective, which is, what if we only had Deuteronomy? What if Deuteronomy was the only book we had? What if we didn't have Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus? I mean, Leviticus, we could argue, again, the laws, a lot of the laws there are about sacrifices. But Leviticus had the laws of kashrut. Well, the editor of Deuteronomy, or the writer of Deuteronomy, took those laws of kashrut and pretty much used them almost verbatim and put them in the book of Deuteronomy. But if we had only had Deuteronomy, then we would have had a concise law guide for the people without the great backstory and without the understanding of the context. And it's very likely that's what happened. And again, you can imagine what it would be like if we only had that, but there probably was a time when we only had that, or that's the only thing that we saw. There's a guy walking around with the book of Deuteronomy, or the scroll of Deuteronomy, and a bunch of other scrolls are sitting in a library somewhere, and those scrolls are not brought out regularly. And there are a bunch of them. There are a bunch of them. And by the way, some of those other scrolls that they had in that library, we don't have anymore. They got destroyed. And we know that they exist because, as we talked about them, they're referred in the Bible. The Bible talks about the book of the wars of the Lord. We don't have that book. So there's other books that our ancestors had that are referred to in the Bible that we don't have. So it could have been, it is possible that we could have only had the book of Deuteronomy. Honestly, you probably could have figured out what Sodom and Gomorrah were. You probably could have figured out what happened in Egypt. But you definitely get a better understanding of it to read the story of Moses and the Pharaoh and the plagues when you read it in Exodus. So it's interesting to think about that. Thank you for pointing that out as we get to a really, really great section. So I keep promising it. I love the line, "You stand everybody here before you this day," not only those who are with us, but the ones who are yet to come, so to speak. But here we get a beautiful, beautiful return to that, kind of back to that concept. "When all these things that befall you, the blessing and the curse that I have set before you, and you take them to heart amidst the various nations which the Lord your God has banished you, and you return to the Lord your God, and you and your children heed his command with all your heart and soul, just as I enjoin you upon this day." And again, "B'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha," and again, "Banecha," like your children, and "Asher anochi mitzavcha hayom," that same repetition of that Deuteronomy, that early part of Deuteronomy from Ve'ahavta. Then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and take you back in love. He will bring you together again from all the peoples from where the Lord has scattered you. Even if your outcasts are at the ends of the world, from there the Lord your God will gather you. From there he will fetch you. And that's a beautiful image of the kibbutz, which is the word yakabetz, which means is where the word kibbutz comes from. The gathering in of those exiles, the people coming back home. That doesn't matter where you go. You can go to the ends of the earth. God will find you and bring you back. And the Lord your God will bring you to the land that your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And he will make you more prosperous and more numerous than your fathers. Wow. Then the Lord your God will open up your heart and the hearts of your offsprings to love the Lord your God again, v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshacha, with all your heart and soul, l'ma'an chayecha, in order that you may live. And the Lord your God will inflict all those curses upon the enemies and foes who persecuted you. You, however, will again heed the Lord and obey his commandments that I enjoin you, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, that you will be commanded again. You are commanded and do this day. And the Lord your God will grant you abounding prosperity in all your undertakings, in the issue of your womb, the offspring of your cattle, and the produce of your soil. For the Lord will again delight in your well-being, as he did in that of your fathers, since you will be heeding the Lord your God and keeping his commandments and laws that you recorded in the book of his teaching. Once you return to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshacha, over and over again. And here's my favorite part. And for those who've been with me before for the last several years, one of my favorite lines in the whole Torah. And this is what I'm recording, because I haven't done a recording for a couple weeks of Torah teaching. And of course, it's on my favorite part. Ki ha-mitzvah hazot, this instruction, this commandment, which I enjoin upon you again, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, I enjoin upon you this day. It's not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond your reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you shall say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. No, the thing is very close to you. It is in your mouth, beficha u'vilcha, it is in your heart to observe it. The thing is very close to you. It's in your mouth and it's in your heart. You don't have to look for it in a faraway place. There's no mystery to it. It's inside of you. And there's no magic, there's no initiation, there's no mystery to, again, where you can find it. It's inside of you already. The Torah is with you already. And these words, lo bashamayim hi, it is not in the heavens. This becomes the backbone for Judaism, which is the Torah is accessible to everybody. The law is for everybody, and it's not going to come back. It's not gone away. It's not something that's going to come back in 1,000 years. It never left. It can't die. It's always with you. It's not, and again, it becomes the backbone for, again, what makes Judaism different from almost, again, every other religion in the ancient world, and unfortunately, too many religions in the modern world, which will tell you there's some kind of magic, or there's something you have to do, or there's something you have to believe that requires, an act of faith, or an act of closing off your mind. No, it's in your heart. It's the law, and it's your responsibility, and it's in your mouth, and it's the way you behave every day. It doesn't happen to you after you die. It's not affirmed at your death. It's with you every single day of your life. And I find that to be so powerful. And so, again, if there's one part of the Torah that I think sums up Judaism and sums up, my belief on what Judaism teaches us. It's that the Torah is not magic. It's not an amulet. It's not for some people and not other people. It's for everybody. And this is the line, Re'eh natati, and we talked about it when we read the portion Re'eh. See, I set before you this day life and prosperity, death and adversity. Every day, and it says Hayom, it says this day. Which day? Every day. Every day is a day of life and death. Life and prosperity and adversity. Every day is a day of choices. Every day we can make a choice. And this is so powerful that Moses tells people, again, before he dies, you have a choice. It's your responsibility to make that choice, to make the life-affirming choice every day. I command you this day, Asher Anochi Mitzavcha Hayom, again, just over and over again, to love God, right? This is Ava, this is loving, like Ve'afta, to love God, to walk in his ways, to keep the commandments, his laws and his rules, that you may thrive and increase, and that the Lord your God may bless you in the land that you're about to enter and possess. But if your heart turns away and you give no heed, and you are lured into the worship of other gods, I declare you this day, you shall certainly perish. You shall not long endure on the soil that you're crossing the Jordan to enter. I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Bracha uklala, uvacharta b'chaim. Choose life. Choose life. If you and your offspring would live by loving the Lord your God, heeding his commands, and holding fast to him, for thereby you shall have life and shall long endure upon the soil that the Lord swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to them. What a powerful line. Choose life. This is our job every day, every single day, to choose life. To choose life. And to understand that that's a choice. This is not a foregone conclusion. It's not something we're guaranteed. It's not something that we always have control over. But the things we do have control over can be life-affirming. And this is really, really a powerful idea, that you have that choice. And please, choose life. So this is why this portion is one of my favorites. Why when I read this every year, I'm amazed. And you talk, Harvey, I said at the beginning, how long ago was this written? To understand that the Jewish people gave us these kinds of lessons, that our ancestors have been studying this for 3,000 years, maybe 2,500, 2,600 years, maybe at the latest, at the youngest, right? The youngest, this kind of idea goes back 2,600 years, that we've been telling people for 2,600 years to choose life. That's amazing. Again, while other people couldn't even conceive of this, that again, as Harvey pointed out, people were making horrible choices. People were then already making bad choices, that Judaism said, choose life affirming, make those decisions that make life better for you and for your offspring. It's just amazing. It's amazing. It's an amazing concept that we've been talking about this for thousands of years, folks. So is it 2,500 years, 2,600 years, 3,000 years, however many hundreds of years? It's unbelievable. And again, it still gets me. It still makes me cry a little bit to think about the way that portion, the way Nitzavim ends. So again, Kitavo, it was kind of good that we read Kitavo with Nitzavim, because Nitzavim is much more uplifting. It has negativity. I mean, it's not like it's free of negativity. It says it says there's bad things that can happen and things could get terrible, but the theme of it is definitely much more positive, and it's much more uplifting. And even when it's cautionary, it is powerfully uplifting and and in a positive way, trying to get people to do the right thing. Again, it says, I put before you life and death, and blessing and curse, but it actually tells you, make the right choice. It doesn't just say they're both in front of you. It says choose life. So the guidance isn't just, well, here's your choices, right? You know, the choices that gives you the choices, and it says, come on, make the right choice. Make the right choice. And it's encouraging. It is a great motto. You know, you could put that on a T-shirt or on a bumper sticker. I think, unfortunately, if you put "Choose Life" on a bumper sticker nowadays, people would say you're making a political statement that you didn't necessarily. You don't want to get into fights with people or whatever. But you know what? It's such a beautiful line. There's actually a book that was written a few years ago. It was actually written by. I'll show you who wrote it, because he's a very well-known rabbinic author. And let me see if I can bring up the book. But it is really a great title. It is, wait, hold a second. Let me just find the book. I can't remember the name of the author though right now. Is that, oh, no, that's not the book I'm looking for. Hold a second. I can't find it. I'll find it in a second. It was, that's not the book that I'm looking for.
While
again,
you're looking, Rabbi,
I was looking on Amazon where the book was, but this was a book that I saw from a rabbinic book, and it came out. It's not the book that I was thinking of, but it is it's a great, yeah, here it is. Here it is. Oh no, that was Choosing a Jewish Life. Sorry, I can't find the book right now. But anyways, it is the motto that I would like to live by, and I want you to live by it too. To make, again, to make life affirming choices and to
I think the name of the book is Therefore Choose Life. I can't remember the author. I have a copy of it upstairs.
I know it's somewhere. Wait, you're right. Maybe it's Therefore Choose Life is maybe the full title. But that's this line from Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. I mean, if you want to remember a verse of Torah, or even just, again, 2 words, choose life. V'charta v'chaim, choose life. The last part of what we're going to read today is Vayelech, which is 1 chapter. It's a 1-chapter portion. Almost always it's read with Nitzavim. I mean, very rarely is it split off. And when it is split off, it literally is the shortest portion that we have in the Torah, because as you can see, it starts in chapter 31, and it ends on chapter 31. Zinu, the next chapter is chapter 32. So it's total of 30 lines. It's 30 verses. So we'll finish up with Vayelech, which is, again, usually read with Nitzavim, and it definitely has the theme and kind of continues the kind of more positive approach of Nitzavim. So here's how it begins, and Vayelech literally means "and Moses went," which usually implies like he left. He moved. The word lech lecha or halach means to go, to walk, but here it clearly means that he went out and he spoke to the people. It doesn't mean that he left and spoke to the people. He went to them and he spoke to them. And he said to them, "I'm now 120 years old. I can no longer be active. Moreover, the Lord has said to me, you shall not go across the Jordan River. The Lord your God himself will cross over before you, and he himself will wipe out those nations from your path and you shall dispossess them. Joshua is the one who will cross over before you, as the Lord has spoken. And again, there's this recognition that, is Moses really happy about this? No. He doesn't seem to say, oh, I'm glad Joshua is doing this right now. But he states the fact, this is what God wanted. God will be there too, but the Lord has spoken, right? Kasher diber Adonai. God said that. God said, Moses, you're not going to do it. And so this is, if anything, another recognition by Moses is, I'd like it to be me, but it's not going to be. It's not going to be you, Moses. And no matter how many times you say it, it's not going to be you. And even though he said, and again, he says right here, more of the Lord has said to me, you shall not cross over. So he goes, he says, I'm 120 years old. I know I'm no longer as active. I can't be what I used to be, but it doesn't even matter because God has told me I can't. So again, there seems to be a little, if not bitterness, again, Moses is not, acceptance, grudging acceptance that this is what is going to happen. The Lord will do to them as he did to Sihon and Og, the king of the Amorites, the Canaanites, right? And to their countries when he wiped them out. So those were the Canaanites that were on the other side of the Jordan River. You've already beaten them. We read about it over and over again in Numbers. Clearly was an important event. The Lord will deliver them up to you, and you shall deal with them in full accordance with the instruction, the mitzvah here, that I have enjoined upon you. Be strong and resolute. Another great line from this week's portion. Hizku ve'imtzu. Be strong and be resolute. Chazak va'amatz. That's what we say in Israel today. The Israeli military, that's their motto. The Israeli tzahal, the Israeli military, is chazak va'amatz. Strong and resolute. That is their that's their like semper fi. In Israel, that's and it's the motto because it's biblical. Chazak va'amatz. Be strong and resolute. Be not in fear or in dread of them, for the Lord your God himself marches with you. He will not let you fail or forsake you. Then Moses called Joshua and said to him in sight of all Israel, be strong and resolute. There again, chazak va'amatz. Be strong and resolute. For it is you shall go with the people to the land that God swore to their fathers to give them. And it is you shall who apportion it to them. So Moses says this to Joshua in front of everybody so that everybody can see this transfer of power. Everybody can see it. And the Lord himself will go before you. And by the way, we have an inauguration, we have a ritual of transfer of power, but this is a little different because, like when we do the transfer of power in America, it is the president when he swears on the Bible and he is brought in as the next leader. But what we have in Jewish tradition is an actual passing from the previous leader to the next leader. There's actually a transition between them. There's no intermediary. There's no, he did this or he did, he walked out or did that. And now this guy, has now done this. There was literally, in this case and in Jewish history, there was literally a transfer of power from one person to the next. It's a pretty powerful idea, that there needs to be some kind of transfer and there needs to be some kind of ritual that marks that transfer and that it's done publicly. And again, we do it publicly, but that there actually is a line between the two, that there's a connection between the two, between the first person and the next person, and that person and the next person. And it says, the Lord will go before you, he'll be with you, not forsake you, fear not, and be not dismayed. Lo tira, and it says, velo techat, no, do not be afraid. And Moses wrote down this teaching and gave it to the priests. And here again at word, haTorah hazot, this teaching, and gave it to the priests, the sons of Levi, who carried the ark of the Lord's covenant, and to all the elders of Israel. So what is this teaching? Is it the whole Torah or is it the book of Deuteronomy? Well, the authors of Deuteronomy definitely wanted you to know that this book that they had was with the Israelites all the time. But again, later on, the rabbis interpret this to mean the whole Torah. So that the Torah was in the ark as well. So at a certain point when Moses was done with his business, that it was written down and put in the ark. And it was put down before he died, which kind of begs the question, how did he write about his own death? Which is in the book of Deuteronomy at the very end. We'll read that in a few weeks. And so the rabbis actually taught that Moses wrote down the words of his own death, and that his tears mixed with the ink on the scroll as he wrote it. That God told him, this is what you've got to write, and you got to write about your own death. But here's the interesting thing about the book, the scroll, say the Torah, this covenant. Moses wrote it down, he gave it and put it in the ark, and Moses instructed them as follows. Every 7th year, the year set for remission, the year of giving up the debts, right? The sabbatical year. At the Feast of Booths, at Chag HaSukkot, at the holiday of Sukkot, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God, in the place that the Lord will choose, you shall read this teaching aloud in the presence of all Israel. Now, if this teaching, and here's kind of like I think one of the clues that this is the book of Deuteronomy and not the whole Torah. If on the holiday of Sukkot, you've got to read the whole book, reading the whole Torah would take a long time, a long time. Reading this will take a long time too, but it's doable. It's doable. Let's say it would take a couple hours, maybe an hour and a half to read. If you're reading not too fast, but fast enough that people can hear you, but you're reading pretty fast. It can be done in an hour and a half. But think about how big that is, that you actually, again, have to hear it at least every 7 years. You're going to hear the whole book of Deuteronomy. Everybody's going to hear it, not just the priests, not just the king, but everybody is going to hear this at least every 7 years. They're going to hear this whole thing read out for everybody to hear. It's pretty wild, because it says, gather the people, men, women, children, and the strangers in your communities, that they may hear and so learn to revere the Lord your God, and to faithfully observe every word of this teaching at Kol Divrei HaTorah Hazot. So everybody will follow it. Their children too, who've not had the experience, shall hear and learn to revere the Lord your God as long as they live in the land that you are about to cross the Jordan to possess. The Lord said to Moses, the time is drawing near for you to die. So now here, before we read that last part, I read it too fast, but there's an understanding here that there will be a time when your kids and your kids' children's children, they're going to forget the context. They're not going to have known what it was like to leave Egypt, but they're going to hear the story and they're going to learn that they have to keep it. And this is a really, really big deal. This is a really big deal that they need to hear it, because they're not going to have the same experiences, right? They're not going to have the knowledge and the firsthand witness of what it was like to leave Egypt, to be in the wilderness, to know God and be led by God. And it's going to be harder for them because they're not going to have those experiences. This is not going to be an easy thing for your kids, for your descendants to understand. So they have to hear it. They're going to have to hear this law. And it says, the Lord said to Moses, the time is drawing near for you to die. Call Joshua and present yourselves in the tent of meeting, that I may instruct him. So God needs to talk to Joshua. Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tent of meeting. The Lord appeared in the tent in a pillar of cloud, the pillar of cloud having come to rest at the entrance of the tent, which means everybody sees it happening. Even though there are only 2 people in the tent, everybody sees this pillar descending onto the tent. The Lord said to Moses, you are soon to lie with your fathers, This people will thereupon go astray after the alien gods in their midst, in the land that they are about to enter. They will forsake me and break my covenant that I made with them. So Moses is told, this is not theoretical. This will indeed happen. These people are going to mess up. My anger will flare up against them, and I will abandon them and hide my countenance for them. They shall be ready prey, and many evils and troubles will befall them. And they shall say on that day, surely it is because our God is not in our midst that these evils have befallen us. Yet I will keep my countenance hidden on that day because of all the evil they have done in turning to their gods. Now, it says in here something very powerful, which is that the people, when they see all these things happen, which they deserve, right, because they've turned away from God, but now they're going to say, oh no, God's not with us, God's left. It doesn't say that God's left. It says that God has hidden his face. That's what the fancy word countenance means. It is haster astir panai, which they don't really translate it great here. But haster astir panai, that means I will surely hide my face. Haster is to hide. It's not to disappear. It's not to not be there. It's not to leave. It's not to depart. It's to be hidden. It means that God's there. God can't be seen, but God is there. And this concept of God hiding his face, haster panai, haster panim, or hester panim, which is the hiding of God's face, means that God doesn't depart, but sometimes you don't see God. Doesn't mean that God's not there. It's just you don't see God. And it's a really interesting idea in Judaism. It's one that people say when we don't feel God or when we don't sense God, it's not because God's not there. It's because God is hidden. Why is God hiding? Because again, we've lost God. And so it's God like hiding. It's a game of hide and seek, and God's hidden, and we forgot that God was hiding. We never went back and looked for God. And so there's this idea that God's there, but we just can't see it. And we've forgotten that God is hiding. So there's an interesting midrash, there's an interesting explanation in this, which is that the word haster, aster, if you hear the word aster or astir, it is like Esther. Now, the name Esther is not connected to this. I will tell you right now, her name originally was Hadassah in the Bible, but she's given the name Esther or Ishtar, which is actually the Persian goddess of beauty, Venus. Esther, Ishtar, was the goddess of beauty and fertility, right? It's a pagan god, actually. But the rabbis pointed out that the name Esther, astir in Hebrew, means to hide. And what's the hidden in Esther? God's name is not mentioned once in the book of Esther. God's hiding in the book of Esther, but that doesn't mean God isn't there. And so they like to point, we like to kind of play on that name Esther and say the name Esther means hidden. Doesn't mean God isn't there. It just means God's hiding. And God is behind the scenes. God is there, but behind the scenes. And so it's almost like, again, like God is covered up, but still there. And what covers up God? What's covering up God? We're the ones that are covering up God. We're the ones that are throwing the covers in front of our eyes. And it's an interesting concept. And again, it's a play on the word Esther. So Hester Panim, the hidden face of God. It's a very important idea in Judaism, especially, again, in Rabbinic Judaism, which picks up that theme frequently, especially, again, when we don't feel God's presence. That God is there, we just don't feel God. And it's on us. It's incumbent on us to try to search God out. And to find God, to see God in our world around us. So it's a great idea. And by the way, I will show you this. This is something that I know for sure, because actually I have this on my shelf right now. And this is a book that is for those who want to understand the rabbinic, how God kind of developed in rabbinic Judaism. This is a book that my professor from UCSD and now at the University of Georgia, Richard Elliott Friedman, wrote this book called The Hidden Face of God, which is a really interesting meditation. I can't believe already now it's been 25 years that it came out, but it's a really good book on how do we find God. He's the guy who wrote the Bible. And so this is, Who Wrote the Bible is his great book. And again, for people who want to understand Deuteronomy and the authorship issues, go read Who Wrote the Bible. There's no better book on that subject. But when you want to understand, well, what does it mean for us today? What's the kind of, this is his book that kind of explains the theology based on how to read the Bible. And it's got some stuff that we're very he's interested in, including Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, the Kabbalah and some of the things that he brings together, these are personal interests of his, but it's very interesting what he writes about kind of modern theology, and it is his kind of explanation for how we can come to terms with God based on the Bible, based on rabbinic tradition, and it's quite good. And also he talks a lot about Christianity in the book too. So it's an interesting book. Not easy book to read. I mean, it got a lot of stuff in it. It covers a lot of ground, as we would say. But it's a really great book. So recommend it. And it's based on this hidden face of God. So let's take a look back at the last chapter, and we're almost finishing up with chapter. Sorry, I went back to chapter 30. Here we go. Therefore, write down this poem. Kidvu lachem et shirah hazot, which again, shirah, like my daughter's name, means song, but it also can mean poem. Well, the shirah, we're not really sure which song they're talking about, but the next chapter, Ha'azinu, is a song. So maybe it's the song that we're about to read. So when it says, write down this poem that I teach and teach it to the people of Israel, put it in their mouths in order that this poem, and again, that's the word shirah, can be song or poem, may be a witness against the people of Israel. And we'll see that when we read the Ha'azinu. When I bring them into the land flowing with milk and honey, that I promised it on oath to their father, and they eat their fill and grow fat and turn to other gods and serve them, spurning me and breaking my covenant, and the many evils and troubles befall them, then this poem shall confront them as a witness, since it will never be lost from the mouth of their offspring. For I know what plans they are devising, even now, before I bring them into the land I promised them an oath. That day Moses wrote down this poem and taught it to the Israelites. And he charged Joshua, son of Nun, be strong and resolute, for you shall bring the Israelites into the land that I promised them on oath, and I will be with you. When Moses put down in writing the words of this teaching to the very end, Moses charged the Levites who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, take this book and teaching and place it beside the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, and let it remain there as a witness against you. Well, I know how defiant and stiff-necked you are. Even now, while I am still alive in your midst, you have been defiant toward the Lord. How much more when I'm dead? Gather me to all the elders of your tribes and your officials, that I may speak all these words to them, that I may call heaven and earth to witness against them. For I know that when I'm dead, and you will act wickedly, and turn away from the path that I enjoined upon you, and that in time to come, misfortune will befall you for having done evil in the sight of the Lord and vexed him by your deeds. Then Moses recited the poem to the very end in the hearing of all the congregation of Israel. Now, what's so weird is that this poem is now in the next portion that we read. And this is the Parsha Ha'azinu. This is the portion that we would read next week, but we don't, because next week we read, not next week, but next weekend we read the portion for Rosh Hashanah. And again, the poem, the song, I like to call it the song. The song Ha'azinu begins, give here, Ha'azinu, listen heavens, let me speak. Let the earth hear the words I utter. And this is this poem, this song that Moses gives to the people as a warning, as a cautionary song, and again, as a reminder. And how do you remember it? Because it's a song. So if you can't understand the covenant that I just gave you, the blessings and curses, if you can't understand the laws that I gave you for the last 20 chapters, I'm going to give you a song. And we get a song. And then at the very end, Moses gives us a blessing, God's blessing. And that's the very last chapter, Vizot HaBracha. So the last chapters of Deuteronomy are blessings and curses, or another brit, another covenant, a ritual. Then there's a song, and then there's a blessing. And this, again, follows chapters and chapters of laws. So, again, we have the very beginning of Deuteronomy. Just again, you can get a macro picture of what Deuteronomy is. It begins with the first 10 chapters, which are reminders of where you came from. It then goes into laws, rituals that you have to keep. Then it goes into this covenant, this blessings and curses. Then it goes into this poem or song, and then it goes into a blessing. That's the book of Deuteronomy. And it makes sense that whoever edited it, whoever wrote it, however it came about, that we have different modalities. There's different ways that God teaches us. And it's like the perfect book, because it's got all of these different pieces to it. It's not one thing. It's not just a book. It's a song. It's a record. It's a movie. It's all of those things. It's gotten a little narration. It's got everything. And so that's why Deuteronomy could have been read or studied or heard, read out loud, chanted, if you will, as the book, because it had everything in it. It had all these different media for those days. That was the media. It was song and poem. It was blessing. It was all these different styles. So it's really quite amazing. And again, as we get to the end of it, it all starts to come together. We see all the pieces that make up Deuteronomy. So we don't really have many more chapters. We're about to finish up. As I said, we're going to have a couple of portions for the holidays, for Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. We don't have Ha'azinu is going to be read just before Yom Kippur, and in 2 weeks' time. On the 26th is the Saturday of Ha'azinu, and then we have Sukkot after that, and then we have this Vizot HaBracha. So if you look at Ha'azinu, Ha'azinu starts here in chapter 32, and this is the song or the poem. The Ha'azinu song or poem goes to here. It's one chapter. It's 52 verses, so it's a long chapter, but it's that chapter. And then Vizot HaBracha, which is the blessing, is chapter 33. And then chapter 34 is Moses saying goodbye and dying, which is only 12 verses. So the reality is that in these we don't finish the Torah reading until we don't finish Vizot HaBracha. We don't have Simchas Torah until October 11th. October 11th. That's like a month from now, right? Well, it takes us a month to read the last 3 chapters of the Torah. Honestly, I mean, you just saw it. I kind of pointed out, visually, but it's chapter 32, chapter 33, and chapter 34. And chapter 34 is only, I know I'm going fast through it, but I want you to see, it's 12 verses. So it's really quite amazing that we kind of slow down. We slow down time, and we take we go with Moses in his last moments. We slow down with him, and we stay with Moses as he sings to us or reads poems, whatever. I like song, but as he sings to us, as he blesses us, and then as he says goodbye. Those are the last verses. And what amazing way to say goodbye to Moses, to learn from him and to be inspired by him. And again, there are definitely things to think about as we come to the end of the year, and as we think about, again, over this last year, the people that we've lost. And again, I many of the people here on this call have lost some people during this last year. There's something pretty fitting about coming to the end of a Jewish year and thinking about, the last, what happened over the last year, and being here with Moses as he says goodbye. It's very powerful to kind of recreate that in our own lives. And with that, before I start to cry, we're gonna wrap up. But
Rabbi, you know what I've noticed the last few chapters of Deuteronomy? You're really seeing Moses as the spiritual leader, whereas before he was the leader of the people. Kind of different. But I'm seeing him as he's reciting this to the people that he's the spiritual leader now.
Yeah.
Getting close to, death.
Yeah, and he does as he gets close to death, he does take on that, instead of being a political leader or teacher, to actually now almost become the voice between God and man. That that is what one of the most powerful things is that he does this. But again, it makes us think about those people in our lives who teach us and who who give us that kind of connection between God and our own behavior, which again, hopefully we learn from them, and hopefully we can sing those songs and remember them. That's the key thing, right? Is to remember these things. And today we thankfully we've got video, and we've got photos, and we've got audio, and so many different ways to remember people. But it's really important to remember that there are lessons that people give us through their lives, and Moses is the best example of how to do that. But it's not just Moses. It's not just meant to be Moses that does this. We're supposed to act like Moses. We're supposed to be able to leave behind a legacy that people will know. We can learn from their good and from their bad. We can learn from their mistakes too. But people do have the ability to, and again, not everybody does, but some people will, and we never know who can be that inspiration and say, they taught us by their life and their behavior, and then encouraged us to do better. So that's the amazing thing about what Moses did, as you said, to be a spiritual leader, to be the person that kind of gives us the that when they die, that their message lives on and you can hear them. I mean, I think that's the thing that we say when we lose somebody, but we can still hear their voice, and we don't need to see a videotape, and we don't need to see hear an audio tape of them or whatever, but we can hear their voice in our heads. Then they, I think to some extent that's the best you can do as a person in life, is to be someone's voice in a positive way, by the way, I should say. I mean, there are people.
I've mentioned it to you before, Rabbi, that I'll sit in a service and I'll hear a certain prayer, and right next to me, I hear my dad's voice.
Yeah. There are definitely voices that we hear that you don't have to.
And those are the voices you don't have to go to a psychiatrist or anything,
One of the things that is sticking with me is the phrase "choose life," because each morning when you're in grief, you have to bring that to yourself and choose life once again and get moving. And I know you must be going through this, Mark, and I know I am on a daily basis. And it's the phrase choose life that keeps me moving.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, the people who were inspired by, one of the things that they inspire us with the way they lived is that they did that. And so, when
Yes.
people say, well, how do you preserve their memory? By doing what they'd want you to do. And again,
Yes.
I know, for Lee or for my dad, people who lived life to the fullest and who didn't wallow in sadness and grief, and, definitely had sadness and grief. I mean, experienced tragedy, but you don't give into it, and you push on every day and say, today I'm going to get up and I'm going to do something. Right. And that inspiration is what, keeps us going. And again, those voices of choosing life start with God or start with Moses, telling us that. And we still hear it, hopefully, from people to this day. And gosh, you hope you hope you impart that to somebody else, that you inspire somebody else to have that positivity. And again, in Lee's,
I know that you do that, Mark.
Well, but in Lee's case, I can also hear Lee, I can hear him singing, and that's
Yes.
that's the great thing when you actually hear those songs and you hear when you hear those voices, they're very much alive. So it is, it's strange. I mean, you recognize that those are memories, but they're very powerful. And again, hopefully they're ones that get us to choose life. So I think there's so many opportunities we have to choose life. And gosh, even in the midst of this stuff where we constantly are being hit with restrictions, bad things, man, there's opportunities every day to do something good. So I hope you, I gotta tell you, I hope everybody continues to make good life affirming choices in this year. Please choose life. That could be that could be your motto for the year ahead. However you want to, gosh, I know it sounds so political now, but really it should be our motto. It should be our motto. And again, because it has two things in it that are so important for Judaism. Chai, right? We say life. I mean, there's a reason why we say l'chaim. There's a reason why we have chai as our symbol, as our 18. Yes. It's life, right? But there's the second part of it, which is choice, which Judaism stresses so much, the idea of responsibility, and that we have choices and we have to make good choices, and that the responsibility is ours. So choosing and life are both there. I'm not like making a statement other than what two words are better for kind of encapsulating the Jewish values of life and choices and responsibility. Mm-hmm. So that's why that would be my two-word phrase for what is Judaism, is choosing life. So all right, everybody, choose life. And again, maybe I'm just going to put that up there. It'll be my new Facebook picture or whatever. I don't know. How do you I don't know.
Makes sense to me. Do it.
Yeah, why not? And I can tell people it's from this week's Torah portion. Anyways, again, everybody, stay healthy and stay positive. I really hope that everybody is going to make the best of these last few weeks. Or week and a half. It's not even a few weeks, but I'm too busy right now. I'm too busy working. Somebody do some good soul searching and some good. No, I'm joking. I am trying to figure out how to make this next year better, but try to do some stuff to get the new year on the right foot. You know what I mean? Try to do some good stuff.
And I want to hold you all in my heart with love. I hold you all with love.
Thank you.
We love you too.
We love you, and we want you to stay healthy. Everybody, again, hope to see you in good health. We will be here next week, God willing. And
yes.
I'm making this is my appointment with everybody, that we get to continue to study Torah throughout our lives. All right?
Amen.
Take
Amen.
care.
It was beautiful tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Joyce.
Rabbi Mark.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.